What is up, everybody? It has been quite a long time, but here is one of my most long-awaited videos. Can you beat Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne without buffs? One thing that the Megami Tensei series is both famous and infamous for is the way that it actually makes use of buff skills. In most JRPGs, moves that involve applying buffs or debuffs to characters aren't useful at all. In most cases, the bonuses they provide are minimal, they don't last long enough, and using them is just more trouble than it's worth. This is not the case in Shin Megami Tensei. In SMT, they make or break boss battles especially, and Nocturne is one of the games that forces people to rely on them the most. So, because of how much I hate myself, I'm going to be playing Nocturne as someone who has never played SMT before, and attempt to beat the game without relying on buffs or debuffs. As with any challenge run, before we get started, let's lay down our list of rules. The main rule for this challenge is that I can't use any move that buffs my status or debuffs the enemy status. The only exception that I am making to this where I would allow status buffs on myself are from skills used by the enemy. There are two skills in the game that do this, Taunt and Provoke. What they do is they increase the enemy's physical attack by 2 levels while decreasing their defense by 2 levels. Because there's no way to remove buffs from your own party, and I don't really have control over it, I'm going to make an exception for it. This doesn't mean that I'm allowed to use these skills against the enemy myself, it just means that if the enemy does use it on me, I'm allowed to keep the buffs. I'm also making it so that I'm still allowed to use the skill Focus. By definition, this skill is a buff, but it doesn't affect my status, it only works on one party member, and it only works for one attack. What it does is it makes your next physical attack have 2.5 times the amount of damage it would normally do. So, I guess you could say it is a buff, but because it doesn't actually affect my status, I'm going to make an exception for it. And lastly, me not being allowed to use buffs or debuffs doesn't mean I can't use buff or debuff cancels. Dakunda and Dakaja are the two moves that remove debuffs from your party or buffs from the enemy party. I think that if I can't use buffs, I should at least be able to cancel the ones used by the enemy. The other rule should be obvious, no cheating or hacking the game. However, just because of how scarce save points are in this game and how confusing the dungeon design is, I am going to be allowing the use of save states outside of boss battles. Oh, and the last rule is that I have to aim for the true demon ending. That means I'm going to have to fight all the fiends and complete all the kalpas in the Labyrinth of Amala. Without buffs, that is definitely going to be fun. Now, before I start, I also want to make a few things clear. Unlike later SMT games, in Nocturne you don't have full control over a demon's moveset when you fuse them. For one thing, you can't get rid of their starting skills, and the skills that they inherit through fusion is completely random. The only way that you can control them is just by re-rolling until you get the set that you want, and sometimes it takes so many tries you just end up going with some skills you don't want. Throughout this video, you will see buff skills on demons. The rules aren't that I'm not allowed to have them, I just can't use them. So when you see buffs or debuffs on my party members, it doesn't mean that I'm cheating, it just means that I haven't been able to get rid of them yet. But as soon as my demons learn new skills to replace the old ones, these skills will be the first to go. One last thing that I should mention before I start is that I'm not going to be playing the original North American version of Nocturne. This is the original Maniacs version of Nocturne that included Dante from the Devil May Cry series, but because we never got the first version, they just released it as Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. However, there was a third version of Nocturne that we never got either. That version is Nocturne Maniacs Chronicle Edition, which was released in 2008 and it came with Raito Kuzunoa vs King of Baton. This version is basically the same, except it replaces Dante with Raito Kuzunoa. Like I said, this version was never officially released in North America, but there exists a fan-made patch that fully translates this version into English. Aside from the new dialogue, this version is basically the same, but a few things have been corrected. Like some of the demons' names have been changed, and Candelabrum has been corrected to Menorah. Now that I have everything laid out, I think it's time we got started. As soon as we turn the game on, we watch the opening. Get to that sweet title screen, choose New Game, and select Hard as the difficulty. We watch the opening cutscene, and then we get to choose our name. As usual, I choose Gnarly as my nickname, but for his real name, I name him Dante from DMC, so that way you can still say that this version has Dante from Devil May Cry in it. Now, one thing that's cool about Nocturne is that not only can you give your protagonist 3 names, but you can also name the other major character. The next one is Yuko Takao. Honestly, I don't think I'll be able to come up with any creative names for any of these characters, so I'm just going to name them after other Megaten characters that they remind me of. Since Yuko Takao is our teacher, I choose to name her Sadayo Kawakami. Once that cutscene is over, we get off at the train station. We get a text message from our classmate Isamu who tells us we're supposed to go meet our friend and visit Miss Takao at the hospital. I was going to name him Naoto Shirogane, but because I don't have enough room for Shirogane, I just name him Edgy Naoto. We go to Yoyogi Park where we meet a journalist named Hijiri, and then we get a call from our classmate Chiaki, who we can also name. I decide to name her Jenna Angel after the character from Digital Devil Saga. Anyway, Hijiri gives us his magazine, and then we go to the suspiciously empty hospital where we meet both of our classmates in person. After wandering around looking for our teacher, we come across a guy named Hikawa, who tries to kill us with a demon, but he gets interrupted by Miss Takao. We then go to the roof, where Takao tells us a bunch of weird, unsettling things about the end of the world. Then all of a sudden, we see Tokyo get enveloped by some dark blue stuff. The whole city starts to bend into a circle around some weird white light, and then we're knocked out by a flash. We then meet Lucifer, who sticks some weird bug things in us. We wake up in the operating room covered in tattoos with a big black spike sticking out the back of our neck. And now we're free to explore. While exploring, we see Hijiri again, and then we get to this red hallway where we get our tutorial battle. Now this has to be the hardest tutorial battle of any JRPG ever. You know how they're supposed to be really easy so that you can learn the mechanics of the game? Well, this is nothing like that. Not only can you die, but you probably will if you don't know what you're doing, or you just get unlucky. The first encounter we barely survive and get our first level up. In this game, I'm going to be going for a physical build. So I'm going to be mostly investing in strength and agility. Now, one thing to know before going for a physical build is that it's going to be a rough first half of the game. In fact, it's going to be quite a while before you can get any good physical skills. But in the long run, it's going to be more than worth it. So we get to the second encounter, and it goes pretty well until our last attack misses, and we die. Just so you know, there are going to be a lot of cheap deaths like that in this game. So anyway, we try again. We get past the second encounter, but then we die to the third encounter. I lost track of how many attempts this took me, but eventually we get lucky enough to make it, and now we can recruit some demons, the first of which being a pixie. Now, here I should tell you that despite this pixie being one of the weakest demons in the game, make sure you hang on to her for the entire game, because if you keep her with you until the very end, you get a huge reward. So next, we recruit a Will-O-Wisp and then a Kodama, giving us a full team of 4. After this point, everything from here on out is pretty much a piece of cake. We beat Fornius easily and make it to Shibuya, where we get access to our first item shop and Cathedral of Shadows. Also in Shibuya, we see Chiaki and Hijiri. After we're done talking to Chiaki, Hijiri sends us to the Amala Network. And let me just say, the Amala Network. Just for this part, the game cranks the difficulty up to an insane level. It's honestly probably the hardest dungeon in the game. Most of the enemies you encounter here are either light or dark aligned, so you can't talk to them. They don't have any easily exploitable weaknesses, they have a wide arsenal of moves, and you're extremely likely to get ambushed. Sometimes you get encounters of up to 7 enemies. 7! I'd say if you get ambushed by a party of 4 or more, you're dead. Oh, and don't even think about trying to escape. Never, not once, did I have a successful retreat. In fact, I don't even think I had it work a single time in this entire game. Now, to be fair, a lot of the things that you encounter here you also encounter later in the game, but by then you have access to better skills and demons to protect you. This is still really early on in the game. Here, you're like a toddler in a wheelchair trying to take on the New England Patriots. Because you're stuck here, you can't exit to go recruit more demons. All you can do is just keep trying and dying until you get lucky enough to escape. I think after like 20 or 30 deaths, I somehow made it to the end where I have to fight the Spectre. This boss starts off as a single enemy, but immediately summons 5 other Spectres that we have to deal with. As if the fights on the way here weren't hard enough, these Spectres don't have a weakness, and I think they have around 130 health, but I'm not entirely sure. Either way, they do take quite a few hits to kill, but once you kill enough of them, they unionize into one giant Spectre. Ironically, this actually makes the fight easier because they now only have 2 press turns. If you can survive the 6 Spectres, which is kinda difficult, it's pretty easy after they unionize. I'm able to beat this boss on my 3rd try. After that, I run for the exit like my life depends on it, and then I breathe a sigh of relief once I'm out. However, I'm not immediately sent back to Tokyo. I'm now in the Labyrinth of Amala, an optional dungeon that I'm going to have to complete if I want to get the true demon ending. I look through the hole to see Lucifer gives a speech, and then he sends us back to Tokyo, and we're now in Ginza. After talking to Nyx at the bar, I go to the Ginza underpass where we meet our first mannequins, get to their quote-unquote village where I can now buy a new Magatama at the junk shop, the Hifumi Magatama. This is going to be essential in an upcoming fight. Though before I can do that fight, I need to get to the tunnel on the other side. The gatekeeper, however, won't let us in unless we get permission from the shopkeeper. However, the shopkeeper won't give us permission unless we get him a 1,000 yen bill. How do you get the bill? Well, do you remember that secret pathway to Loki's room in Ginza that was guarded by a troll? Well, that troll is now gone, so we go into Loki's room where the bill is and ransack the place. Unfortunately, on our way out, the troll catches us, so now we gotta kill him. Now, this troll isn't weak to any elemental attacks, and he hits pretty hard. Considering that this is still before you get any real physical resisting demons, if you're not prepared, this fight is going to be a colossal pain in the neck. But if you have any mind ailment skills, this fight is a joke. Unlike most bosses in this game, he's weak to mind and can easily be inflicted with ailments. I completely forgot about this before coming here, so I just got owned on my first 2 attempts, but luckily I then remember that I have a Mo Rio with Plupina. So, on the first turn of my 3rd attempt, I panic him with Plupina, and after that, he cannot do anything. Literally, it never wears off, and he's never able to attack. I'm able to beat him without him landing a single hit. It does take a lot of hits, but thanks to Plupina, this fight was wrapped on the first turn. And to think that that took me 3 attempts. So we go back to the junk shop, give the guy the bill, and now we can move on. Once we get through the door, we find out that the menorah that Lucifer gave us is glowing. Now, anyone who has ever played this game before should know what this means. It means that there's an upcoming fiend fight. This is the part that I have been dreading this whole run. One of the most infamous bosses in the entire franchise, Matador. This fight is going to be brutal. Even if you haven't played SMT Nocturne, you might at least be familiar with Matador through the memes, but for those of you that are unfamiliar with him, I'm not going to spoil what makes him hard just yet. But I am going to say that before I can even attempt this fight, I'm going to need 3 things. I need to be over-leveled, I need a party that blocks force, and I need lots and lots of Dekaja stones. So, time to get grinding. Now, the way you get Dekaja stones is from Rag's jewelry with garnets and corals. Thankfully, I can get these in the area just before Matador from Nozuchi, so I can look for these while I'm grinding, although the drop rate seems to be really low. I only find 3 in about an hour, but thankfully I already have a few, so I think I have enough. During this time, I also fused Kopa Tengu and Uzume and recruited Nozuchi, all demons with some kind of force resistance. By the time I'm level 19, I think I'm prepared to attempt Matador. I have Demi-Fiend equipped with the Hifumi Magatama and all demons that resist or block force. With that, I wait for the next full moon, go into the hallway, and while I'm trying to pass through, I get sucked into the hole at the bottom, where we come face to face with Matador himself. And he tells us that he challenges us to a duel. Alright, so as soon as the fight begins, Matador leads off by using his signature move, Red Capote. Red Capote maximizes Matador's hit and evasion rate, so if you try to attack him without debuffing him, you're probably going to miss every attack. This is what makes this fight so infamous. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, in most JRPGs, buff and debuff skills are terrible, so most JRPG veterans that tried this game for the first time probably just shrugged off the buffs without giving them a second thought. The whole point of this boss is pretty much to be a slap in the face to JRPG fans to teach them that buffs in Shin Megami Tensei aren't useless, and you're going to need to use them. Obviously, that's not going to be a possibility for me because the whole point of this challenge is to not use buffs. But even though I can't use buffs or debuffs myself, I can still remove them. This is what the Dekaja stones are for. Immediately after he uses Red Capote, I have to use a Dekaja stone before I can do anything else. And because I only have a limited supply, I have to deal as much damage to him as I can before he uses it again. Now, just like every other fiend in the game, Matador has no weakness, so there's nothing we can exploit for extra turns. However, my Uzume has Dark Might, which is the reason I waited for a new moon. Demons with Dark Might are guaranteed to land a critical hit with every normal attack during a new moon. This critical bonus, combined with the extra turn it gives, honestly makes using your normal attack a lot better of an option than using physical skill, and it's something I'm definitely going to be relying on a lot for bosses later in the run. Sadly, I only have one demon with it right now, but it's still a big help with dealing extra damage to the boss. Now, as for Matador himself, he specializes in force attacks, which is why I went with this team. Every time he uses Mazan, my team just eats it up and he loses his turns. But Matador also likes to use physical attacks, and there's really not much I can do about them. Thankfully, he doesn't seem to go for them as much as he does his force attacks, and even when he does use physical attacks, they don't do too much damage. My strategy for this fight is basically to use a Dekaja Stone after Red Capote, and then wail on him as much as I can before he uses Red Capote again. Unfortunately, I do miss a good few times because even without Red Capote, Matador has good agility, but other than the occasional miss though, the fight goes smoothly. Close to the end, he also goes for Taunt, which is one of the skills I mentioned in the beginning that buffs the enemy's attack but debuffs their defense. So technically this is a buff on my party, but I'm not counting it as a buff because it wasn't something I did. And in this game, there's no way to debuff yourself. It does help me out a good deal though. After this, it's just a few more attacks and Matador is defeated. That fight honestly went a lot better than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting it to be the end of the run or anything, but to beat Matador on our first attempt without buffs on hard mode, that's pretty impressive if I do say so myself. But we're not in the clear yet. We get a call from Lucifer who wants us to come back to the Labyrinth of Amala. Once there, we can go into the first kalpa. Now, the kalpas are special dungeons that are designed to be as hard as possible. Their designs are cryptic, there are no save points, and we can't recruit demons. But because we're going for the true demon ending, we have to do them. Thankfully, the first kalpa is pretty easy. We get through it without much difficulty, but once we're at the end, we can't go any further because we need more menorahs. So all we can do now is just head back. Next, we're brought to Ikebukuro, where we make our way through the Mantra headquarters and see Isamu, who just got beat up by Thor. Then we're captured and thrown in jail. For what? For being friends with the guy that just got beat up? I'm not his friend, Isamu freaking hates me. So anyway, the way we prove our innocence is by beating a series of bosses. The first two go down without too much trouble, but then we fight Thor. This is where playing the game without buffs is starting to get difficult. Thor has all-around good stats with very strong attacks. He spends most of the fight either going for his normal attack or spamming Mazio or Mazionga. The biggest issue here is that I don't have any demons with an electricity immunity. I think it goes without saying, but this fight doesn't go well and we just get creamed. So I load my last save and rethink my strategy. This time with Raiju, Thor isn't as hard, but he's still pretty hard. Thanks to Raiju's electricity immunity, he loses his turns after he uses electric attacks, but it still does a good amount of damage to everyone else. Oh yeah, did I also mention that Thor has Diorama? Dealing with a boss that heals is always fun. Basically, all I can do in this fight is just heal with Kikuri Hime, attack with everyone else, and hope he uses Mazio and Mazionga, which will cause him to lose his turns. My second attempt goes pretty well until he uses Zeodyne on Demi-Fiend, then uses Mazionga and kills him. The third attempt goes about the same way, but he goes for physical attacks more often. And for his single target electric attacks, he doesn't go for Raiju, which makes things all the more infuriating. He's even able to kill Momonofu with a single Zeodyne. Other than that setback though, my strategy is basically the same as the last fight. After several turns of stalling and healing, it's a close battle, but I do manage to beat him. Now that we've been declared innocent by the court, we can now go see Gozu Tenno, the boss of the Mantra faction. But first, on our way back to the building, we're interrupted by another boss that we have to fight. The boss who would be Dante, but in this version is Raido Kuzunoa. So I'm assuming most of you haven't played this version, but if you think this fight is going to be any different, it's not. Moves and animations aside, Raido is completely identical to Dante, but that's definitely not a good thing because this fight is still really hard. His two strongest attacks are Makoi Boomerang and Yoshitsune. Yoshitsune is pretty much a guaranteed critical hit, and Makoi Boomerang always has a chance to cause panic. Thankfully it's a low chance, but if an ally gets it, he's better off dead. In this game, with panic, you have a chance to drop Maka, and on hard mode, you drop a lot. I literally cannot afford to have this happen, so if it does, I have no choice but to rage quit the fight and start over. I get off to a pretty good start on the first attempt, and it goes okay up until he gets the panic on Momonofu with McCoy Boomerang. Before long, he kills the rest of my demons by alternating between Yoshitsune and McCoy, and it comes down to me just 1v1ing him with Demi-Fiend. At this point, I've done a good amount of damage to him, and he goes for a provoke, so because of the attack boost from his provoke, I make one last-ditch effort to deal as much damage as possible and see if I can kill him before he finishes Demi-Fiend. But that doesn't happen, and he ends up beating us on our first attempt. Second attempt goes about the same, but this time he gets the panic on Demi-Fiend, so yeah. Thankfully on the third attempt, RNGesus seems to be on our side, as he doesn't seem to get very many critical hits and doesn't get the panic on any party members. We even get a few lucky dodges in. He also goes for 2 provokes, which, even with our defense minimized, he still can't one-shot Demi-Fiend with any attacks, and the attack boost is just what we need to take him down before he can cause any real damage. After wailing on him with +4 attack, we win the fight. Albeit it was a pretty lucky fight, but we were able to beat Raido on our third attempt. Now it's time to go see Gozu Tenno. He tells us he's declaring war on the Assembly of Nihilo and wants to help us attack their headquarters in Ginza. But before we get there, there's another fiend fight now available, Daisojo. Most people say that this fight isn't as hard as Matador, but it's still pretty hard. Now, I don't remember having much trouble with Daisojo myself when I played this game, but then again, that was with buffs. So let's see how this goes. Alright, so right off the bat, Daisojo leads off by going for his exclusive skill, Meditation. This is a heavy almighty skill that drains HP and MP from one enemy. Keep in mind that at this level, the amount of MP he steals is enough to drain well over half your MP. If you're going for a magic build, this move is going to mess you up. Thankfully, this isn't that big a deal for most of my party since we rely on physical attacks, but we do need MP to heal, so if our healer gets hit with it, well, we're kinda boned. Oh, and this is basically all he does. I'm not even kidding, it's just meditate, meditate, and meditate some more. He does occasionally go for his normal attack, but 99% of his turns, he just uses meditation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because my party is physical focused, the MP drain isn't that big a deal, but what is a big deal is the HP drain. Without buffs, he steals about 80 HP with each meditation, so he's gaining back about 160 HP each turn. Our physical attacks only do about 60 damage with each hit, so with the extra turn from Momonofu, we're only able to do about 240 damage each turn. So because of meditation, it's really only 80. This just makes the fight drag on and on and on. Oh, and did I mention that this boss has 3 phases? Yeah, this is only the first phase of the fight. Once you get to the second phase, he starts using insta-kill moves, Mahama-on and Mamudun. And this is exactly how he beats me, by killing Demi-Fiend with Mamudun. At this point, it became clear to me that I wouldn't be able to beat Daisojo with what I have now. So you know what that means? Yep, more grinding. Though, the problem with grinding here is that because I did the first Kalpa early on, I'm already kind of over-leveled, so I can't really grind here without it being painfully slow. I do grind up to level 27, level up my demons so that they have better skills, and fuse a new demon, and then attempt the fight again, once again during a full moon. In this attempt, I actually get pretty far. I'm able to make it not only through the first, but also the second attempt thanks to some Tetragostones. But then I forgot about his third phase where he starts using Startle and Preach. Startle is basically the in-between of Beast Eye and Dragon Eye, giving him 3 press turns. Preach deals mind damage and has a chance to inflict Charm, Panic, or Sleep to our entire party. Because I have no mind resistance, I can't do anything. After he starts doing this, I think I only last like a couple of turns before he kills me. I know at where I am right now, there's no way I'm able to beat him, but then I realized something. Unlike Matador, he's not blocking the way that I need to go or anything, so I decide to just continue on with the game and come back when I'm higher level. So, I make my way to the Assembly of Nihilo, where supposedly the mantra have already been and destroyed everything. But inside we meet Hijiri, who tells us that the mantra actually haven't destroyed the Assembly. So, we go underground into the new dungeon. Down here there are a few easy mid-bosses, but nothing too problematic. The design of this dungeon, on the other hand, hoo boy. This part takes me about 2 hours, during which time my Momonofu evolves into Arahabaki and my Kopatengu evolves into Karasu Tengu. Once we're done with the assembly of Nihilo, we're much higher level than we were when we entered, so now I think it's a good time to attempt Daisojo again. The next couple of attempts don't go very well, but then I realize that I'm now high enough level to fuse Matador. Now, the thing about Fiends is that once you're able to summon them, they're all some of the best demons to use in the game. They're all immune to ailments and insta-kill moves, and all have great stats. After messing with Fusion for a bit, I think I got a good moveset for Matador, with Dark Might, Drain Attack, and Tetraja. My strategy now is to set up Tetraja with Matador and just keep attacking as usual. With this, it does take me a few more attempts, but on attempt 3 or 4 though, I luck out. I bring him to the second phase pretty quickly. He doesn't get any ailments on Demi-Fiend with Preach, and he goes for his normal attack much more often. And my attacks rarely miss. Other than that, my strategy is the same. Just keep attacking like there's no tomorrow, which is made much easier because I'm now higher level. It is a long battle, but with a lot of patience and a whole lot of luck, I finally bring down Daisojo. That was the hardest boss so far. I don't know how I was able to get through that, but I get the feeling my suffering has only just begun. Anyway, we can now move on with the game. Back at the Mantra HQ, Chiaki reveals her plan, Gozu Tenno crumbles, and Isamu gets set free. After that, we can now enter the door on the first floor that was previously guarded. Once I go through the door, I get the notification that my menorah is once again flickering. And you know what that means? Another fiend fight. This one being Hellbiker. And he's not very hard. His attacks are pretty strong, but unlike Daisojo, he doesn't have anything that prolongs the fight or kills us in one hit. His Hell Exhaust attack is nulled by Matador, and his Hell Spin is resisted by Eligor. The only kind of problematic skill is Hellburner, which Kikuri Hime is weak to, and toward the end of the fight she does go down, but we're quickly able to beat him after that by just hitting him with Dark Might criticals. On our first attempt, we're able to beat Hellbiker. With him out of the way, I now have 2 menorahs, which means I can go into the second Kalpa. And this is where the Kalpas of the Amala Labyrinth start to get difficult. And by difficult, I just mean really confusing. This one in particular is full of holes, forks, invisible doors, confusing corridors, and it just goes on forever. It's all just classic SMT dungeon nonsense, but there are a number of neat things in it, like this one shady broker who will sell you a healing Nue for 30,000 Maka, and a cursed hallway that if you make it through, you get 250,000 Maka. After about 2 hours of exploring this Kalpa like an idiot, I finally get to the end where I meet the Riders. After that, I go to Kabukicho Prison, which is another really annoying dungeon. But while there, I become high enough level to fuse Daisojo. Now, if you played this game, you should know that Daisojo is commonly considered one of the best demons in the game, mostly because of how early he gets the skill Prayer, which is the best healing skill in the game, and because of his meditation skill, which basically gives him unlimited MP. When I fuse him, I give him Makatora, which allows me to transfer MP from him to other demons, so now I can basically farm unlimited MP off of enemies. Anyway, I get to the end of the prison where I have to fight Mizuchi. He's not particularly hard, but he has this skill called Mirage, which causes the party to panic. And there's nothing I can do about it here, because in every battle, he always gets the first attack, and he always leads off with it. So, the only thing I can do about it is to just keep resetting until it misses Demi-Fiend. But after that, well, he's pretty easy. He only has 1 turn, and he only has ice attacks. Plus, you might start to notice that he gets smaller the more damage you do to him. I'm not exactly sure what the context is, but as he gets smaller, he also gets weaker, making the fight consistently get easier and easier. For the rest of the fight, I just spam Fire Breath with Eligor and Meditation with Daisojo, while also healing with Daisojo when I need to. He also goes for Mirage 2 more times, which thankfully the second time it misses, but the third time, get this, he actually runs out of MP because of all the meditations I spammed him with. That's honestly pretty funny, and it makes the rest of this fight a complete joke. Mizuchi goes down, and now we can finally move on. We set free the mannequins, meet Fudomimi, get another cutscene with Isamu, meet Hijiri at Ginza, and then go through yet another confusing dungeon to get to Asakusa. Once we're here, our menorah flickers again, But before fighting the next fiend, I have some preparations to do. In the junk shop, I buy the Nirvana Magatama for Divine Shot and then fuse a few new demons. After that, during the new moon, I'm ready to attempt the next fiend, White Rider. White Rider proves to be a lot harder than I remember. One thing to know about the riders that they all have in common is that they can summon minions, which in this battle are virtues, which do nothing but spam Raccoonda. Because I can't lower his attack with Tarunda or Warcry, this is our biggest problem. Fortunately though, the virtues are easily weak to wind, which gives me more turns, but the more time we spend attacking the virtues, the less time we can spend attacking White Rider. He also likes to keep spamming Dragon Eye and summoning more virtues. White Rider's two main attacking moves are God's Bow and Prominence. God's Bow insta-kills any target that doesn't null light, which sounds bad, but it can easily be blocked with Tetraja. And when he uses Prominence, Bareth drains it, which makes him lose turns, but it still deals a ton of damage to everyone else. The first two attempts I lose because he just keeps attacking me after double Raccoonda, and I die. By the third attempt, I think I figured out his attack pattern. He only seems to go for Dragon Eye when I kill the virtues, so instead of killing them, I bind them with Shibabu. At least I try to, but it misses every single time, which tells me that they're immune to ailments. So instead, I just try to ignore them, but that's kinda hard to do when they just keep spamming Raccoonda and lowering my defense. And that's how I die. For the next attempt, I fuse an Orthrus with Dark Might, because he drains fire and has good physical strength. Once again, I ignore the virtues, and this strategy proves to be the ticket, because just as I was hoping, he keeps going for Prominence. Still though, Daisojo and Demi-Fiend are pretty vulnerable to it, so every time he uses it, all I can do is just pray that it doesn't double hit either of them. Later in the battle, he starts using his normal attack, which he uses quite a few times on Daisojo, and sadly he does go down, but I summon Matador in his place. And with him already being at low health and now having 3 Dark Might attackers on the field, he doesn't last much longer. Although, after I kill him, I still have to kill the virtues, which is kind of a pain, but thankfully they can't really do anything all that harmful to me. I finish them off, and that concludes the White Rider fight. Oh, and if you think that this game would give us a break before throwing another fiend at us, you would be wrong. Red Rider is the next fiend, and he becomes available in the Great Underpass of Ginza immediately after you beat White Rider. Now, just like White Rider, Red Rider can also summon minions, these being powers, and they use Tarukaja, which makes things infinitely more difficult for me since I'm not using any demons with Takaja. And his attacks are much more problematic. His strongest attack is Terror Blade, which not only deals an insane amount of physical damage, but it can also cause panic. And unlike Prominence, it's not so easy to find demons that resist it. The only demon I have on me that nulls physical is Arahabaki, but that doesn't really help much when Demi-Fiend's death means game over anyway. And that's exactly how this fight goes. On the first few attempts, he just uses Terror Blade and I get vaporized. For the next few attempts, I come up with a different strategy. I switch Matador with Arahabaki, and instead of ignoring the powers, I drain their MP with Meditation so that they can't use Tarukaja. But Red Rider still gets lucky with Terror Blade, and more often than not, he gets the Confuse on Demi-Fiend, which completely ruins my strategy. So I try buying the Null Mind Magatama from Shibuya, which solves my panic problem, but it doesn't protect me from the Terror Blade's damage, which, I forgot to mention, can hit twice, and if it does that on Demi-Fiend, it's game over. I try setting up attack mirrors, but then he just goes for Bolt Storm and Wind Cutter, which nobody resists and Arahabaki is weak to. And even if I do get his powers to where they can't use Tarukaja, he can still decimate my party with the 2 turns he still has. After about a dozen or so tries, I just give up, say F it, and decide to come back later, just like I did with Daisojo. So anyway, we go back to Asakusa, where Hijiri tells us we have to stop the Nightmare system at the Assembly of Nihilo's other headquarters. So we get to it, and then we get to go through one of my favorite dungeons, the Obelisk. Not only is the design of this dungeon cool, but the puzzles are fun, and it's pretty straightforward. As you'd probably expect, our goal is to get to the top, where we have to fight the Moray sisters. About halfway through the tower, I come across a Cathedral of Shadows, where I fuse Kushinada Hime and Hell Biker. Not long after this, I get to the bosses, where we have to fight 3 of them in a row, but these fights are all extremely easy. Once we beat them individually, we now have to fight all 3 of them at once, and they do the same stuff in their individual fights. So, because they're working together, I guess it's harder, but it's still super easy because they barely have any HP and they barely do any damage. After we beat the Moray sisters, we rescue Miss Takao. She tells us about her reason, and then she turns into this, thing. Miss Takao, are you okay? Oh, hey, she gave us the power to carry 2 more demons, so, yeah, she'll be fine. So now with that out of the way, and me being higher level and having better demons, I think it's a good time to attempt Red Rider again. And, things aren't really much better. Terrorblade is still just too strong, and because the party gets 4 turns, he's able to use it twice. If the first one doesn't kill you, the next one will. Though I think I have one more strategy left. This is going to be my last resort. I go to Ginza and buy as many attack mirrors as I can from Rag's jewelry so that I can cheese the fight by forcing him to use magic. And this kinda helps. I mean, he can still decimate my party with his magic, but I can at least survive most of the time. So I keep trying with several failed attempts, and just when I'm about ready to give up again, I hit the jackpot. He kills Bareth with a deadly wind followed by a bolt storm, so I summon Matador in his place. I get extremely lucky from here on out. The first Terrorblade he uses, some of us dodge. He also gets Daisojo down to 1 HP with Wind Cutter, and then follows it up with a Bolt Storm, but it doesn't hit Daisojo. Oh, and he also starts using Wind Cutter on Matador, who nulls it. After a whole bunch of critical hits and close calls, somehow in these last few turns, I'm able to deal enough damage to kill Red Rider. All I gotta do after this is kill the powers, and then I'm in the clear. Well, that boss definitely beat Daisojo for being the hardest of the whole run. I don't know how I'm able to keep scraping by these really hard bosses, but I'm starting to get worried. Oh, and because we already went ahead and did the Obelisk dungeon, we now have yet another fiend to fight, Black Rider, who appears in the hospital. Now, this fight can either be one of the hardest or one of the easiest fiend fights depending on your party. His signature skill is Soul Divide, which halves your HP and causes mute. Thankfully, it doesn't affect my party since it's mostly made up of fiends and they all naturally null curse, and Demi-Fiend also nulls curse thanks to our new Djed Magatama. Bareth is the only one affected by it, but we can easily just cure it with Daisojo's prayer. Unfortunately, he also has Megidola. Because that's an almighty attack, there's nothing I can do about it, and after he uses it a couple of times, he beats us on our first attempt. The second attempt, though, he must have forgotten that he had it, as he only ever seems to go for Soul Divide. This makes the majority of the fight a joke because he loses his turns every time he goes for it. The legions barely even get a chance to act. Normally, they use Makakaja, but again, it doesn't matter because the attacks he uses don't affect us. While Black Rider is wasting his turns, we just keep pummeling him with Dark Might, and it's not long before he's defeated. The legions take a little more damage to defeat because they resist physical attacks, but they don't cause us any real trouble. Well, that was easier than I was expecting. Don't you just love it when games have you fight the easiest bosses last? Anyway, now that we have 3 Minoras, we can now start on the 3rd Kalpa. Now, the enemies in this Kalpa are really tough. You can encounter Osei in here, and he has Dragon Eye. Getting caught at the wrong time by him can easily lead to a game over, and if you see one of these things in an encounter, you have to kill it on the first turn. Otherwise, he'll just use Dragon Eye and probably kill you. Oh, and if you're ambushed, well, I hope you're okay with losing some progress. Another thing to note about the 3rd Kalpa is that there are different doors that you can or can't go into depending on your stats. I've been going for a strength build, so I can only go in the strength door, but there's a Death Stone in it, and that's really all I need. Once we're past that part, though, we come face to face again with the man himself, Raido Kuzunoa. And before we can progress, we have to accept his challenge. And by challenge, I mean running away from him. This part is basically just a minigame where you have to run away and make it out of the area while Raido chases after you and shoots you. If you get too close to him, he attacks you and then flees, and then you have to start the area over. This part may sound hard, but it's really not. As long as you keep checking your map and know your way around, you'll finish it pretty easily. But once you make it to the end, you then have to fight Raido again for real as a boss. Okay, so you remember how hard Raido was back in Ikebukuro? Well, now Raido has new moves on top of all the ones he had in his last fight. The first attempt does not go well at all. He just hits Demi-Fiend with Yoshitsune, gets a critical, then uses his normal attack on him and kills him. For the next one, I equip Demi-Fiend with the Kamuto Magatama so that he resists physical. And this time the fight goes much better, but he does get a bunch of lucky critical hits and takes out Bareth pretty early on. I just keep pummeling him with Dark Might and Focus Divine Shot, and it seems to go okay. However, remember those new skills that I mentioned? Well, once you get him low enough, he starts using his Tsuchigumo attack, which almost kills the party and close to the end, takes out Hell Biker. With only Daisojo left, normally I'd give up here, but I do see that he's in his low health animation, so I go for that one last Divine Shot to see if that'll do it, and it does not. So he kills me in the next turn. The biggest problem for me in this fight is his Tsuchigumo attack. Yoshitsune and his gun attack called, Boogie Woogie. Those and his two elemental attacks, Mishiguji and Hitokoto, don't really do that much and they can easily be prevented. But once he starts going for Tsuchigumo, it's pretty much over. And if he follows that up with pretty much anything else or uses Provoke before Tsuchigumo, it's basically the same deal. There's nothing I can do because Tsuchigumo is an almighty attack. I lose track of how many times I attempt the fight after this, but pretty much every single one of them ends with him either using Provoke Tsuchigumo, double Tsuchigumo, or just making Demi-Fiend panic and having him drop 100,000 Maka. And, guys, I don't even know what to do. These bosses just keep getting harder and harder, and I've lost track of how many times I've seen that game over screen. Guys, I don't know what I've gotten myself into, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. Well, I might as well try one more time. I've already gotten pretty lucky so far. He hasn't used Tsuchigumo yet, and I see that he's at low health, so let's see if I can do it. Let's see if I can finish him off with this one last attack. Lady Luck, don't fail me now.